400 years ago, in the Vatican's underground chambers, secrets began to accumulate that still stir the minds of historians today. 85 kilometers of secret documents contain evidence of the Crusades, the Inquisition, and World Wars. In 2019, Pope Francis partially lifted the veil of secrecy by declassifying the archives of Pius XII. But what did these documents reveal? Were the rumors about deals with the Nazis, silence about the Holocaust, and assistance to war criminals confirmed? And most importantly, what secrets does the most mysterious archive on the planet still hold? Today we will try to unravel the secrets that the Vatican has guarded for 4 centuries. If you are interested in this topic, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. And in the comments, let's discuss one controversial question. Can Pope Pius XII's silence on the Holocaust be justified by diplomatic considerations and the safety of Catholics? Or was it a moral crime for which the Church must take responsibility? Share your opinion. Was it a tragic mistake or a necessary act of wartime? On August 8, 1610, Pope Paul V signed a bull that changed the course of world history. On that day, the Vatican's secret archives were officially established, a repository that was destined to become one of the most mysterious places on Earth. 415 years later, we still do not know all its secrets. Until then, papal documents had been kept together with books in the Vatican library. But Paul V understood that some papers were too dangerous to be seen by outsiders. He ordered that the most secret documents be separated and a separate repository created for them. Thus was born an archive that would witness the Crusades, the Inquisition, World Wars, and political intrigue. The word secret in the archive's name comes from the Latin secretum, meaning personal, private. It was the private archive of the Pope, accessible only to a select few. Over the centuries, documents accumulated in the Vatican's underground chambers, creating a unique chronicle of European history. Paul V could not have imagined that his decision would give rise to countless legends and conspiracy theories. As early as the 17th century, rumors began to circulate that the archive contained prophecies about the end of the world, correspondence with the devil, and evidence of the existence of aliens. Of course, these were just speculations, but the secrecy of the archive only fueled interest. In the first decades of its existence, the archive was replenished with documents on the fight against Protestantism. The 30 Years' War was raging in Europe, and the Vatican was closely monitoring religious conflicts. Every treaty, every secret correspondence, every denunciation ended up in secret files. The documents of the Inquisition occupied a special place. The minutes of interrogations of heretics, descriptions of torture, lists of those burned at the stake. All of this was neatly systematized and placed on shelves. Galileo Galilei, Giordano Bruno, thousands of nameless victims, their fates remained forever in the Vatican files. By the end of the 17th century, the archive occupied several underground rooms. Monks archivists worked by candlelight, copying and cataloging documents. A unique storage system was created that allowed the necessary papers to be quickly found among thousands of others. Pope Paul V established strict rules of access. Only the Pope could decide who could see a particular document. Even cardinals were given only selective information. This tradition of secrecy continued for centuries and became one of the main characteristics of Vatican politics. Thus began the history of the most mysterious archive in the world. a repository that still excites the minds of historians and conspiracy theorists. Imagine a corridor stretching from Moscow to Tver. That is the total length of the shelves in the Vatican archives, 85 kilometers of documents. If all the folders were lined up in a row, they would stretch across half the country. But what lies behind these figures? The archive is located in the Vatican's underground, in specially built climate-controlled bunkers. The temperature is maintained at 18 degrees Celsius, with 50% humidity. Each document is protected from light, moisture, and time. Modern technology guards ancient secrets. According to official data, the archive contains about 35,000 volumes and 630 different collections. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Rumor has it that 40 kilometers of shelves are occupied by occult literature, the most complete collection of magical texts in the world. The Vatican neither confirms nor denies these rumors. The oldest documents date back to the 8th century AD. Among the treasures of the archive are letters from Emperor Charlemagne, the bull of excommunication of Martin Luther, and correspondence with Byzantine emperors. There are even documents from the time of the Crusades with the seals of the Knights Templar. Of particular interest is the correspondence between popes and monarchs of different eras. Letters from Henry VIII requesting the annulment of his marriage, secret agreements with Napoleon, and diplomatic correspondence from the First World War. Each letter is a piece of the mosaic of world history. No less amazing is the collection of documents on scientific discoveries. It includes materials from the Galileo case, correspondence with Copernicus, and reports on the Church's reaction to Darwin's theory of evolution. The Vatican has always closely followed the development of science, sometimes supporting and sometimes hindering progress. A separate section is devoted to missionary activity. Reports from Jesuits in China and Japan, descriptions of Native American civilizations, plans for the Christianization of Africa. These documents tell not only about the spread of faith, but also about the colonial policies of European powers. The modern cataloging system allows you to find the document you need in a matter of minutes. Each folder has a unique code, and each sheet is numbered and described. However, the complete catalog of the archive has not yet been published. Researchers only have access to those sections that the Vatican leadership allows. Every year, about 1,500 scholars from around the world visit the archives. But even they see only a small part of the treasures. Most of the shelves remain closed, guarding secrets that could change our understanding of history. February 1810 was a dark month in the history of the Vatican archives. On Napoleon's orders, French soldiers broke into the papal chambers and began to take documents to France. The emperor understood that whoever controls information controls the world, and the Vatican archives were a treasure trove of compromising information on all the European courts. The operation to remove the archives had been planned for months. Napoleon personally studied the lists of the most valuable documents. He was particularly interested in materials about French kings, secret correspondence with European monarchs, and documents about church property. The emperor intended to use these papers for political blackmail. Pope Pius VII was powerless to stop the looting. France had occupied the Papal States, and resistance was impossible. The archivist monks watched in tears as soldiers packed priceless manuscripts into ordinary wooden boxes. Many documents were damaged during transport. More than 3,000 boxes of documents were taken away, about a third of the entire archive. Caravans of carts stretched for miles, carrying the papal secrets across the Alps. Napoleon ordered the archives to be placed in Paris, in the former monastery of Sainte Geneviève. French scholars were given a unique opportunity to study the secrets of the Vatican. The emperor ordered the most valuable documents to be translated into French. Particular attention was paid to materials on the relations between the popes and the French kings. Napoleon was looking for legal grounds for his claims to church lands and wanted to prove the dependence of the popes on secular power. But fate played a cruel joke on the emperor. It was in the Vatican archives that French historians found documents proving the antiquity of papal power and the independence of the Church. Constantine's bull granting land to the Pope turned out to be a forgery, but other documents confirmed the Vatican's right to secular power. After the fall of Napoleon in 1814, the question of returning the archives arose. Cardinal Ercole Consalvi personally went to Paris for negotiations. The French government agreed to return the documents, but with conditions. In exchange, Paris demanded copies of some materials on the history of France. The return of the archives took 2 years. Not all of the documents were found. Some were lost in the chaos of the revolutionary years. Some papers were sold to second-hand bookshops as waste paper. French collectors still find medieval papal bulls in antique shops. By 1816, most of the archives had been returned to the Vatican. But the lesson had been learned. The most secret documents were walled up in the dungeons, and a showpiece collection was created for outsiders. Since then, the true treasures of the Vatican archives have been hidden in secret vaults, inaccessible even to researchers. The Napoleonic epic showed how important documents are for political struggle. Since then, every European government has dreamed of gaining access to the Vatican's secrets. On August 13, 1881, an event took place that historians around the world had been waiting for centuries. Pope Leo XIII decided to partially open the Vatican's secret archives to independent researchers. For the first time in 270 years, outsiders were given the opportunity to touch the papal secrets. The decision was not an easy one for the pontiff. The cardinals tried to convince him that opening the archives would undermine the authority of the Church. Too many compromising documents were stored on the shelves. Inquisitions, political intrigues, dubious financial transactions, all of this could become public knowledge. But Leo XIII understood that science could not be stopped. Secular historians were already actively studying the Middle Ages using state archives. The Vatican risked being left behind by scientific progress. In addition, the Church hoped that opening the archives would help refute the most odious accusations against the popes. German and French medievalists were the first to be admitted to the archives. Professor Ludwig Pastor was granted exclusive access to the documents for writing his History of the Popes. French historian Pierre Duchesne began studying early Christian texts. Their work caused a sensation in the scientific world. However, access was strictly limited. Researchers were only allowed to study documents dating up to 1846, the time of Pope Pius IX's pontificate. Anything relating to the present day remained off-limits. In addition, every scholar underwent a thorough check for loyalty to the Church. The system of work in the archives resembled a secret laboratory. Researchers were not allowed to move freely around the storage rooms. The documents they requested were brought to them in a special reading room. Photography was prohibited. Only hand copying was allowed. Each scholar was monitored by a Vatican curator. The first discoveries stunned the scientific world. Historians found authentic letters from the Borgias, documents about the sacking of Constantinople, and secret correspondence between popes during the Great Western Schism. Many established historical concepts had to be revised. Documents about the Inquisition were particularly sensational. It turned out that the scale of the persecution was smaller than previously thought. Many trials ended in acquittal, and torture was not used as often as previously believed. But there were still plenty of horrific details. The interrogation records read like nightmare novels. The opening of the archives caused a storm of reaction in society. Catholics hoped for the rehabilitation of the Church, Protestants for the exposure of papal crimes. Both found confirmation of their views in the documents. History turned out to be more complicated than black and white schemes. In the first 10 years of the archive's work, more than 200 scientific works based on Vatican documents were published. New departments of church history were created at universities across Europe. The study of the Middle Ages received a powerful impetus for development, but the most important secrets remained under lock and key. Documents from the last 100 years were still classified, and this barrier would remain in place for a long time. The 20th century was the most controversial in the history of the Vatican. 2 world wars, revolutions, the fall of monarchies, the Church found itself at the center of political turmoil. It was during these decades that the most controversial documents accumulated in the archives, which still provoke heated debate among historians. The First World War put the Vatican in a difficult position. Pope Benedict XV tried to maintain neutrality, but in practice this proved impossible. Catholics fought on both sides of the front, Austrians against Italians, French against Germans. Every papal statement was interpreted as support for one side or the other. The archives of this period contain secret negotiations on a separate peace. The Vatican tried to mediate between the warring powers, but without success. The correspondence with Russian Emperor Nicholas II is particularly interesting. The Pope offered a church union in exchange for an end to the persecution of Catholics in Russia. After the 1917 revolution in Russia, relations with the Soviet Union became one of the Vatican's main headaches. The archives contain plans for secret missionary activities, lists of repressed priests, and secret reports on the situation of believers. These documents paint a tragic picture of the Church's struggle for survival in an atheist state. But the most heated debates are caused by documents from the 1930s and 1940s. The rise of fascism and Nazism presented the Church with a moral dilemma. On the one hand, totalitarian regimes threatened Christian values. On the other hand, they fought against communism, which the Vatican considered the main threat to civilization. Relations with Nazi Germany were particularly complex. In 1933, Cardinal Eugenio Pacelli, the future Pope Pius XII, signed a concordat with Hitler. This agreement remains the subject of fierce debate to this day. Critics accuse the Vatican of legitimizing the Nazi regime. Defenders argue that the Church was trying to protect the rights of Catholics. Archival documents reveal the complexity of the situation. The Vatican received information about the persecution of Jews as early as 1938, but papal diplomacy preferred quiet negotiations to public protests. It was believed that loud statements would only worsen the situation of the victims. Equally controversial are documents about assistance to war criminals after the war. Tens of thousands of Nazis and their accomplices fled Europe through Vatican channels. Rat trails led to South America, where fugitives received new documents and asylum. The Vatican's role in these operations remains under investigation. At the same time, documents about the Cold War were accumulating in the archives. the Vatican became an active participant in the fight against communism, supporting anti-Soviet movements in Eastern Europe. Secret operations in Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia were financed through church channels. These documents show that the Vatican was not just a religious center, but a full-fledged political player. And like any politician, the Church sometimes made controversial decisions, the consequences of which are still felt today. On July 20th, 1933, an event took place in the Vatican that still provokes heated debate among historians. Cardinal Eugenio Pacelli, the future Pope Pius XII, signed a concordat with Nazi Germany. This document became one of the most controversial in the history of the Holy See's diplomacy. Negotiations on the concordat began even before Hitler came to power. German bishops had long sought official recognition of the rights of the Catholic Church in the country. The Weimar Republic was anti-clerical, and Catholics felt oppressed. The Nazis' rise to power unexpectedly opened up new opportunities for an agreement. Pacelli had extensive experience working with Germany. From 1917 to 1929, he served as papal nuncio in Munich and Berlin. The cardinal was well-versed in German politics and was considered an expert on German affairs. It was he whom Pope Pius XI entrusted with conducting negotiations with the new regime. The Nazis were no less interested in an agreement than the Vatican. The Concordat was supposed to give Hitler's regime international legitimacy. In addition, the Führer wanted to neutralize the influence of the Catholic Party of the Center, which could become a source of opposition. The Church's blessing significantly strengthened the Nazis' position. The negotiations were conducted in the strictest secrecy. Pacelli met with representatives from Berlin in private residences, away from prying eyes. The Vatican archives have preserved detailed minutes of these meetings. The documents show that both sides made compromises in order to reach an agreement. Under the terms of the Concordat, the Nazi state recognized the rights of the Catholic Church in Germany, freedom of worship, the inviolability of church property, and the right to religious education were guaranteed. In return, the Vatican undertook to prohibit priests from participating in political activities. However, the most controversial point was the article on the appointment of bishops. The state was given the right to veto the selection of senior church leaders. In effect, this meant that the Nazis could block candidates they did not like. Many Catholics saw this as capitulation to the regime. The signing of the Concordat provoked a mixed reaction around the world. Hitler solemnly declared that the Vatican had recognized Nazi Germany. Catholic newspapers wrote about the protection of the rights of believers. But the liberal press accused the Church of making a deal with the devil. Within a few months, it became clear that the Nazis had no intention of fulfilling their obligations. Arrests of Catholic activists began, church schools were closed, and religious organizations were banned. Pacelli sent protests to Berlin, but to no avail. The Concordat became a dead letter. By 1937, relations between the Vatican and the Nazis had completely broken down. Pope Pius XI published the encyclical With Burning Anxiety, in which he condemned racist ideology. But the Concordat formally remained in force, creating the impression of cooperation between the Church and the regime. When Pacelli became Pope Pius XII in 1939, the Concordat became a heavy legacy. Critics accused the new pontiff of connivance with Nazism. Defenders argued that he was trying to save what could still be saved in relations with Germany. Documents declassified in 2020 shed new light on Pacelli's motives. They show that the cardinal sincerely hoped to use the Concordat to protect German Catholics. But political naivety and underestimation of the Nazi threat led to tragic consequences. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, one of the darkest chapters in the history of the Vatican began. Tens of thousands of Nazi war criminals fled Europe through Catholic channels. These routes were given the sinister name rat trails. They led from the ruined Reich to safe havens in South America. The operation was organized by Austrian Bishop Alois Hudal, rector of the German College in Rome. Throughout the war, this man sympathized with Nazism and considered fascism to be the defender of Christian civilization against Bolshevism. After Germany's defeat, Hudal decided to save the victims of the victors, as he called the war criminals. Hudal used his connections in the Vatican to obtain Red Cross documents. These documents allowed refugees to obtain new passports and visas. Formally, the documents were issued to displaced persons, victims of war. But in practice, they were used by murderers and executioners hiding their true identities. The most notorious criminals fled through rat trails. Adolf Eichmann, one of the organizers of the Holocaust, received a Vatican passport under the name Ricardo Clement. Franz Stangl, commander of the Treblinka death camp, fled to Brazil under the name Paulo Strasser. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Leon, settled in Bolivia. The escape routes were carefully planned. First, the Nazis hid in Catholic monasteries in Austria and Italy. Monks provided them with shelter and new documents. Then the fugitives made their way to ports in Genoa, Naples, and Bari. From there, ships took them to Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay. Croatian priest Kristo Draganović played a special role in the operation. This Franciscan monk served in the Nazi state of independent Croatia during the war. He helped the Ustasha, Croatian fascists who killed hundreds of thousands of Serbs and Jews. After the war, Draganović organized the escape of his charges through the Vatican. American intelligence agencies knew about the rat trails, but turned a blind eye. At the beginning of the Cold War, former Nazis seemed useful allies in the fight against the USSR. The CIA even financed some operations to evacuate German intelligence agents and scientists. The role of Pope Pius XII in these operations remains controversial. Officially, the pontiff did not give instructions to help war criminals, but he also did not prohibit his subordinates from engaging in humanitarian activities. The Pope preferred not to know the details, thus preserving the possibility of denial. Declassified documents show that the Vatican received detailed reports on the activities of Hudal and Draganović. The Secretariat of State was aware of the scale of the operation, but did not intervene. Moreover, some high-ranking prelates personally met with fugitive Nazis. Particularly cynical was the assistance provided to doctors who had participated in the euthanasia program. Josef Mengele, who conducted experiments on people in Auschwitz, safely reached Argentina. Alois Brunner, who organized the deportation of Jews from France, fled to Syria. These people escaped punishment until the end of their lives. The operation continued until the early 1950s. According to various estimates, between 20,000 and 30,000 former Nazis passed through the rat trails. Many of them obtained high positions in Latin American countries, contributing to the establishment of dictatorial regimes. The scandal surrounding the rat trails only came to light in the 1970s, when journalists began investigating Nazi criminals in South America. The Vatican was forced to acknowledge its past mistakes, but the documents have not been fully disclosed to this day. One of the most painful accusations against Pope Pius XII concerns his silence on the Holocaust. 6 million Jews died in Nazi death camps, but the Pope never publicly condemned the genocide. This silence remains a subject of fierce debate among historians and theologians to this day. The first reports of the extermination of Jews reached the Vatican as early as 1942. Polish bishops informed the Holy See about mass shootings in the ghettos. Slovak priests reported deportations to unknown destinations. Hungarian nuncios reported on the construction of special camps. The Berlin nuncio, Cesare Orsenigo, provided particularly detailed information. This diplomat had direct contacts with the German underground and received accurate data on the number of victims. His reports describing the gas chambers and crematoria have been preserved in the archives. The Vatican could not have been unaware of the scale of the tragedy. Pius XII chose a strategy of quiet diplomacy. Instead of public protests, the Pope preferred private negotiations with Nazi leaders. It was believed that loud statements would only worsen the situation of the victims. The Vatican hoped that behind-the-scenes pressure would prove more effective. But this strategy failed. The Nazis ignored the Pope's pleas for mercy. Moreover, they interpreted the Vatican's silence as consent to what was happening. Goebbels wrote in his diary that the Pope does not condemn our measures against the Jews, which gave the regime free rein. The only public statement was a Christmas radio sermon in 1942. Pius XII condemned killings on the grounds of nationality or race, but did not mention Jews or Nazis by name. These vague formulations made no impression on the criminals. The Pope's defenders claim that he secretly helped Jews. Indeed, thousands of refugees hid in Rome under the protection of the Church. Monasteries and churches became refuges for the persecuted. Many priests risked their lives to save Jews from deportation. But this assistance was provided at the local level, without direct instructions from the Pope. Moreover, Pius XII forbade bishops from protesting against anti-Semitic laws. When French cardinals tried to condemn the deportations, the Vatican demanded their silence. The episode involving the Roman Jews in October 1943 was particularly painful. The Nazis deported more than 1,000 people from the Roman ghetto. This took place a few kilometers from the Vatican, but the Pope did not utter a word of protest. Most of those deported died in Auschwitz. The motives behind the Pope's silence remain a mystery to this day. Declassified documents show that Pius XII feared the communist threat more than the Nazi threat. He considered the USSR to be the main enemy of Christianity and did not want to help Stalin in his fight against Hitler. Another factor was the traditional anti-Semitism of the Catholic Church. For centuries, Jews were accused of crucifying Christ and were considered enemies of the faith. It was only after the Second Vatican Council that the Church officially renounced anti-Jewish rhetoric. During the time of Pius XII, such prejudices were the norm. Personal motives cannot be ruled out either. Pius XII was a cautious man who avoided risky decisions. Public protest against the Holocaust could have jeopardized the Church's position in Europe. The Pope chose to preserve institutional interests over moral duty. The consequences of this choice are still felt today. Jewish organizations are blocking the canonization of Pius XII, considering him an accomplice to genocide. Historians continue to debate the role of the Church in the most terrible tragedy of the 20th century, and the Vatican archives still hold documents that could shed new light on this painful subject. On March 4, 2019, an event took place in the Vatican that historians had been waiting for decades. Pope Francis announced his decision to open the archives of Pius XII's pontificate to independent researchers. For the first time, the documents of the most controversial pope of the 20th century became available for study. The decision was not an easy one for the pontiff. Cardinals warned of possible scandals. The archives contained compromising documents about ties to the Nazis, silence about the Holocaust, and assistance to war criminals. The publication of these materials could have dealt a serious blow to the reputation of the Church. But Francis believed that the truth could not be hidden. "The Church is not afraid of history," he told archive staff. "On the contrary, she loves it and would like to love it more and better." The Pope hoped that scientific research would help to objectively assess Pius XII's controversial decisions. The opening was timed to coincide with the 80th anniversary of Pacelli's election to the papacy. On March 2, 2020, researchers were given access to the secret documents for the first time. But the coronavirus pandemic threw a wrench in the works, and full-scale work in the archives did not begin until the fall. Preparations for the opening took several years. Archivists carried out a colossal task of digitizing the documents. Millions of pages were scanned and systematized. New catalogs and search engines were created. By the time of the opening, researchers had been provided with modern tools for their work. Access was granted on a competitive basis. Applications were submitted by scholars from all over the world, from Israel and Germany, the US and Russia, Poland and Italy. Each candidate underwent a thorough review. Preference was given to recognized experts in 20th century history. The first publications appeared as early as 2021. German historian Hubert Wolff published a study on the Concordat of 1933. Italian Andrea Riccardi wrote a book on Vatican diplomacy during the war years. American Susan Zuccotti studied documents on the Holocaust. Materials about the rat trails were of particular interest. French researcher Philippe Chenu found documents confirming assistance to war criminals. It turned out that the scale of the operation was even greater than previously thought. Not only Nazis fled through Vatican channels, but also their accomplices from occupied countries. Equally sensational were documents about the Vatican's finances during the war. Links to German banks, investments in the military industry, and dubious gold transactions were uncovered. It turned out that the Church was much more integrated into the war economy than previously thought. The reaction to the publications was predictable. Critics of Pius XII found confirmation of their accusations. Defenders of the Pope pointed to documents proving that he had helped Jews. As always, the truth turned out to be more complicated than black-and-white schemes. Jewish organizations closely studied each publication. They were particularly interested in documents on the Vatican's position on the Holocaust. So far, the materials found do not change the overall picture of papal silence, but research continues. Catholic historians have tried to find justification for Pius XII's controversial decisions. They pointed to the complexity of wartime, the Pope's attempts to maintain neutrality, and his secret assistance to victims of persecution. But the documents also showed another side: political calculations, compromises with conscience, and silence in the face of evil. The opening of the archives was an important step towards historical truth. But the full picture has not yet emerged. Many documents remain classified, and many questions remain unanswered. History continues to keep its secrets in the Vatican's underground archives. By the end of 2021, the first serious studies of the declassified archives began to yield results. The documents of Pius XII's pontificate proved even more controversial than expected. The image of Hitler's pope was not confirmed, but Pacelli could not be called a heroic savior either. The most sensational documents concerned relations with Nazi Germany. It turned out that Pius XII secretly supported the German resistance to Hitler. As early as 1937, the Pope received information about the military's plans to overthrow the Führer. The Vatican was even prepared to act as a mediator in negotiations for a separate peace. Particularly interesting were the materials on the attempted coup of July 20, 1944. The conspirators informed the Vatican of their plans through Catholic channels. Pius XII did not condemn the assassination attempt on Hitler, which can be considered a form of support for the opposition. The documents confirmed the extent of the secret aid to Jews. Thousands of refugees were hiding in Roman churches and monasteries. The Pope personally gave instructions to provide shelter to those being persecuted. But this aid was provided in secret, without public statements. The reasons for the Pope's silence became clearer from diplomatic correspondence. Pius XII feared that open protests would lead to even greater repression. He remembered the Nazis' reaction to the statements of Dutch bishops after they protested against the deportation of Jews. The persecution only intensified. But the documents also showed another side of papal policy. Pius XII's anti-communism was so strong that it influenced all his decisions. The Pope saw Nazi Germany as a barrier against Soviet expansion. This explains his reluctance to completely sever relations with Berlin. Financial documents revealed a complex picture of the Vatican's wartime economy. The Church did indeed have investments in German companies, but most of them were made before the war. Attempts to dispose of these assets were hampered by wartime currency restrictions. A separate set of documents concerned the post-war period. It turned out that Pius XII did indeed know about the rat trails, but considered them humanitarian aid to refugees. In his view, many Nazis were victims of Soviet revenge, not war criminals. This naive position led to tragic consequences. The documents also revealed the extent of Vatican espionage in Eastern Europe. The Church had created an extensive network of informants in communist countries. Priests passed on information about repression against believers, plans for atheistic propaganda, and the mood of the population. This information was used to plan anti-communist operations. Activities were particularly active in Poland. The Vatican supported underground religious groups, financed opposition literature, and helped the families of those who had been repressed. These operations became a prototype for the future support of solidarity under Pope John Paul II. Documents on scientific research came as a surprise. The Vatican secretly financed archaeological excavations in Palestine, the search for relics in Europe, and the study of ancient manuscripts. The goal was to find scientific confirmation of biblical events and strengthen the Church's position in the dispute with atheism. The declassified materials shed light on the inner workings of Vatican diplomacy. Cardinals openly criticized the Pope's decisions, proposed alternative strategies, and argued about policy priorities. Not everyone shared Pius XII's anti-communist views. The documents confirmed long-standing suspicions about the Vatican's ties to American intelligence agencies. Regular contacts with the CIA began as early as 1947. The Church provided information about communist parties in Western Europe, while the Americans financed religious programs. The Pope's medical records caused a real sensation. It turned out that Pius XII suffered from severe depression and took powerful medication. This explains his indecisiveness at critical moments in history. His illness affected his ability to make firm decisions. But the most mysterious documents concern the Pope's mystical experiences. Pius XII claimed that he had seen apparitions of Christ and received divine revelations. These visions influenced his political decisions no less than diplomatic considerations. Mysticism was intertwined with pragmatism. The initial results of the research revealed the complexity of the historical truth. Pius XII was neither a saint nor a villain. He was a man of his time, with all his contradictions and mistakes. His legacy requires a balanced assessment, without black and white characterizations. On May 13, 1917, in the Portuguese village of Fatima, an event took place that forever changed the history of the Catholic Church. The Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children with a message for all of humanity. But the full text of this message remained a secret of the Vatican for almost a century. Lucia dos Santos, Francisco, and Jacinta Marto claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary 6 times. Each apparition was accompanied by prophecies about the future of the world. The children told of 2 secrets, but were told to keep the 3rd secret until a special time. This secret became one of the greatest mysteries of the Vatican. Lucia, the only one of the children to live to adulthood, recorded the 3rd secret in 1944. The sealed envelope was sent to the Vatican with the condition that it not be opened until 1960. However, Pope John XXIII, after reading the message, decided to keep the secret. The contents of the 3rd secret became the subject of countless speculations. Conspiracy theorists claimed that it spoke of the end of the world, nuclear war, and the fall of the papacy. Catholic mystics saw prophecies about World War II, communist persecution, and future miracles. But the Vatican remained silent. It was not until 2007 that Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone partially revealed the contents of the 3rd secret. According to him, the vision concerned an assassination attempt on the Pope and the persecution of the Church in the 20th century. The assassination attempt on John Paul II in 1981 allegedly fulfilled the prophecy. However, many experts doubted the completeness of the disclosure. There were too many contradictions in the official version. The text published by the Vatican did not explain why the secret had been kept for so long. If it was only about an assassination attempt on the Pope, why was there such secrecy? Declassified documents from the archives of Pius XII shed new light on this mystery. It turned out that the 3rd secret of Fatima was closely linked to the events of World War II. Lucia dos Santos claimed that the Virgin Mary had predicted not only the war, but also its outcome. According to the documents, the vision spoke of a great apostasy in the Church and the world. It predicted the spread of atheism, a moral crisis in society, and a decline in faith among Catholics. These prophecies directly referred to the communist threat that was so feared in the Vatican. The records of Pius XII's conversations with Sister Lucia were particularly interesting. The Pope personally met with the last witness of Fatima and asked her in detail about the visions. From these conversations, it follows that the 3rd secret contained specific instructions for church policy. The Virgin Mary allegedly called for Russia to be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Only this could prevent the spread of communist errors throughout the world. Pius XII did indeed make such a consecration in 1942, but in a form that did not satisfy Sister Lucia. Documents also show a connection between the Fatima secret and Vatican diplomacy. The prophecies were used to justify the Church's anti-communist policy. The struggle against the USSR was presented not as a political confrontation, but as the fulfillment of God's will. The archives contain curious records of the sun miracle in Fatima. On October 13, 1917, tens of thousands of pilgrims claim to have seen the sun dancing in the sky. The Vatican commissioned a secret investigation of this phenomenon by Europe's best scientists. The findings of the investigation remain classified, but indirect sources indicate that no rational explanation for the event could be found. This strengthened the belief of church leaders in the authenticity of the Fatima apparitions and the importance of the third secret. The full text of the third secret of Fatima remains a mystery to this day. Perhaps it will be declassified when the archives are opened in the future. In the meantime, it continues to stir the minds of believers and researchers alike, remaining one of the Vatican's greatest mysteries. For 83 years, the third secret of Fatima remained locked in the papal safe. During this time, 6 popes came and went. 2 world wars broke out. Communism collapsed. But the mysterious message remained a secret. Only Pope John Paul II decided to lift the veil of secrecy, but he did so only partially. Karol Wojtyla had a special relationship with Fatima. The assassination attempt on May 13, 1981, took place exactly on the anniversary of the first apparition of the Virgin Mary. The Pope was convinced that the Virgin Mary had saved his life by deflecting the terrorist's bullet away from his vital organs. While still in the hospital, John Paul II demanded that the third secret of Fatima be brought to him. After reading the message, he reportedly exclaimed, "Everything is clear. It was about me." From that moment on, the Polish Pope became an active promoter of the Fatima cult and personally contributed to the canonization of the Shepherd Children. In 2007, the Vatican published the text of the third secret. According to the official version, Sister Lucia saw a bishop in white being killed by soldiers. This vision allegedly predicted the assassination attempt on John Paul II and the persecution of the Church in the 20th century. However, many experts questioned the authenticity of the published text. There were too many inconsistencies in the official version. First, in the vision, the bishop in white died, while John Paul II survived. Second, the prophecy concerned the future, while the assassination attempt was already history by the time of publication. Vaticanist Antonio Sodano, former Cardinal Secretary of State, hinted that the full text had not been disclosed. According to him, there is an interpretative note by Sister Lucia that explains the true meaning of the vision. This note remains secret to this day. The declassified archives of Pius XII contain intriguing hints about the content of the third secret. In correspondence with Portuguese bishops, the Pope mentions the apocalyptic predictions of Fatima. There is talk of a great apostasy, a mass renunciation of the faith in the last days. Of particular interest are the records of Pius XII's conversations with Sister Lucia. The last witness of Fatima claimed that the Virgin Mary had predicted a crisis in the Church in the middle of the 20th century. This referred not only to external persecution, but also to internal decay among the clergy. According to these documents, the third secret spoke of the smoke of Satan that would enter the Church. Heresies among theologians, moral scandals among priests, and a loss of faith among the laity were predicted. These prophecies describe the crisis of Catholicism in the 1960s and 1970s with remarkable accuracy. No less mysterious are the references to the last pope. Some documents say that the Virgin Mary predicted a pontiff who would witness the end of the world. This pope would have to perform a great consecration of humanity to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. The records about the Russian trace in the Fatima prophecies are intriguing. The Virgin Mary allegedly appeared specifically in 1917, the year of the Russian Revolution. The fall of Tsarism and the victory of the Bolsheviks were predicted in advance. Russia was to become a source of delusion for the whole world. But the same prophecy spoke of Russia's future conversion. After a period of persecution, the country would return to the faith and become a stronghold of Christianity. Many see the fulfillment of this prophecy in the revival of orthodoxy in post-Soviet Russia. The documents also contain mysterious references to 3 days of darkness. This apocalyptic vision describes a period when the sun will not shine and the earth will be shrouded in supernatural darkness. Only prayer and holy candles will be able to protect the righteous from the hordes of demons. The connection between this prophecy and current events remains unclear. Some see it as a prediction of a nuclear winter, others as a spiritual darkness of atheism. Still others believe that it refers to future events that have not yet come to pass. The full truth about the third secret of Fatima remains a mystery to this day. Perhaps it will be revealed when the Vatican archives are next declassified. In the meantime, this prophecy continues to stir the minds of millions of Catholics around the world. Since the opening of Pius XII's archives in 2020, the work of historians has taken on a new intensity. Researchers from around the world have gained access to millions of documents that have remained secret for decades. Each discovery has the potential to change our understanding of key events of the 20th century. German historian Hubert Wolff from the University of Münster heads an international team of researchers. His team has focused on studying the Vatican's relations with Nazi Germany. Over 2 years, more than 300,000 documents have been examined and a wealth of sensational material has been found. Of particular interest were dispatches from Vatican diplomats in occupied Europe. Nuncios regularly informed the Holy See about the scale of the Holocaust, but their reports were often ignored. Pope Pius XII received accurate information about the genocide, but chose not to intervene. American researcher Susan Zuccotti made an important discovery in the study of aid to Jews. She found documents confirming that the Vatican secretly financed rescue operations in Italy. Through trusted individuals, the Church transferred money to underground organizations helping refugees. Italian historian Andrea Riccardi studied diplomatic correspondence from the war years. His findings showed that Pius XII tried to play the role of mediator between the warring parties. The Pope secretly maintained contacts with the German resistance and British intelligence at the same time. Polish scholar Jan Jarin focused on documents about the persecution of Catholics in Eastern Europe. His research revealed the extent of Vatican espionage in communist countries. The Church created an extensive network of informants that operated until the fall of socialism. French researcher Philippe Chenu studied Vatican financial documents from the war period. His findings were sensational. It turned out that the Church had invested in German military enterprises and profited from arms production. These operations contradicted the official position of neutrality. Israeli historian David Kurtzer focused on studying anti-Semitic documents. In the archives, he found materials showing the depth of anti-Jewish prejudice in the Church. Many cardinals shared racist views and supported discriminatory laws. Russian researcher Sergei Firsov studied documents on Orthodox Catholic relations. His work showed that the Vatican closely monitored the situation in the Russian Church and tried to use Soviet persecution to expand Catholic influence. Brazilian scholar Roberto Moreira researched materials on the rat trails. His findings confirmed the extent of assistance provided to war criminals. Thousands of Nazis and their accomplices moved to South America through Latin American Catholic networks. The work of researchers is complicated by the enormous volume of materials. It will take at least 10 years just to digitize all the documents of Pius XII's pontificate. Many texts are written in Latin, Ancient Greek, and Old Slavonic, which requires special training. Modern technologies significantly speed up the research process. Artificial intelligence helps to recognize handwritten texts and translate documents into modern languages. Digital databases are being created to quickly find the necessary materials. Of particular interest are documents that remain classified to this day. The Vatican only opened its archives in 1958, the year of Pius XII's death. Materials from subsequent pontificates are not yet available to researchers. It is believed that the closed archives contain documents about the Cold War, CIA activities in the Vatican, and financial scandals in the Church. These materials may contain even more sensational revelations than the documents already found. The work continues, and every month brings new discoveries. The history of the Vatican in the 20th century is gradually being freed from myths and legends, acquiring the authentic features of a complex and contradictory institution that played an important role in world politics. According to rumors, one of the world's most mysterious collections is hidden in the Vatican's underground chambers, an occult library. 40 kilometers of shelves are allegedly filled with books on magic, astrology, demonology, and other forbidden sciences. Officially, the Church denies the existence of such a collection, but circumstantial evidence suggests otherwise. The history of the occult collection dates back to the time of the Inquisition, when the sacred tribunals confiscated books from heretics and sorcerers. The best copies were not burned, but secretly transported to the Vatican. The Church understood that to fight the enemy, you need to know their weapons. The collection grew particularly rapidly in the 16th and 17th centuries. Inquisitors seized grimoires from alchemists, astrological treatises from fortune-tellers, and demonological texts from exorcists. Each confiscated book was examined by experts in a special department of the Holy Office. The most valuable were considered to be authentic medieval manuscripts. The Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key, and Goetia are legendary grimoires describing methods of summoning demons. These books were written on parchment made from human skin and decorated with pentagrams made of real gold. No less interesting were the alchemical treatises. The collection allegedly contains works by Paracelsus, Nicolas Flamel, and Count Saint-Germain. These texts contain formulas for the philosopher's stone, recipes for the elixir of life, and descriptions of the transmutation of metals. Many of them have never been deciphered. The astrological section of the library is striking in its diversity. It contains horoscopes of Roman emperors, predictions by Nostradamus, Tibetan calendars, and Indian Jyotish. Some documents contain prophecies about the fate of popes and the date of the end of the world. A special place is occupied by a collection of books on vampires and werewolves. For centuries, the Vatican studied cases of undead and developed methods to combat them. The archives contain reports on investigations, descriptions of exorcism rituals, and lists of people suspected of lycanthropy. The demonology section is considered the most dangerous. It contains texts that are said to cause obsession if read. Only specially trained exorcists with special permission from the Pope have access to these books. Modern researchers have repeatedly tried to gain access to the occult library, but without success. The Vatican either denies its existence or cites security concerns. The knowledge accumulated over centuries of studying the dark arts is considered too dangerous. Photos allegedly taken in the secret rooms of the library are circulating on the internet. The pictures show ancient folios with mystical symbols, statues of demons, and alchemical instruments. However, the authenticity of these images is questionable. Some former Vatican employees confirm the existence of an occult collection. Cardinal Gabriele Amato, the Church's chief exorcist, hinted at special books that help in the fight against the devil, but he did not reveal any specific details. If the occult library really exists, its contents could shed light on many historical mysteries. Why was the Church so afraid of science in the Middle Ages? What knowledge was hidden behind accusations of heresy? What really happened during the Inquisition trials? It is possible that the library contains documents about the Church's contacts with other worldly forces. Rumors about Vatican psychics and mediums have been circulating for several centuries. Perhaps the Church secretly studied paranormal phenomena and accumulated unique knowledge. Another version links the library to scientific research. In the Middle Ages, many natural sciences were considered witchcraft. Perhaps the occult collection contains early works on chemistry, physics, and medicine that the Church confiscated from scientists. The mystery of the occult library remains unsolved. But the very fact that these rumors persist suggests that the Vatican is hiding something important. Perhaps the truth will come to light when the archives are declassified in the future. For now, this library remains one of the Holy See's greatest mysteries. Even after the partial opening of the archives in 2020, most of the Vatican's secrets remain under lock and key. Researchers have only been given access to documents dating back to 1958. Everything relating to the last 60 years remains classified. This means that the most intriguing secrets are still waiting to be revealed. The closed archives contain documents relating to the pontificates of John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, and John Paul II. These popes ruled the Church during a period of radical change: the Second Vatican Council, the Sexual Revolution, and the fall of communism. Their decisions shaped the modern face of Catholicism. Of particular interest are documents about the mysterious death of John Paul I in 1978. Albino Luciani ruled for only 33 days, but managed to frighten the Vatican leadership with plans for radical reforms. His unexpected death gave rise to numerous conspiracy theories. The archives are supposed to contain the Pope's medical records, notes from his last days, and autopsy reports. These materials could shed light on one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. Was Lucani poisoned by opponents of reform, or did he die of natural causes? Equally intriguing are the Vatican's financial documents from the 1970s and 1980s. It was during this period that the Ambrosiano bank scandal and the murder of Roberto Calvi erupted. The Church was involved in dubious financial transactions, money laundering, and links to Masonic lodges. The architect of Vatican finances, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, kept the secrets of his operations until his death. The classified documents may contain details of financial machinations, lists of corrupt hierarchs, and evidence of links to organized crime. The third group of secret documents concerns the Vatican's relations with the special services. Cooperation with the CIA began under Pius XII, but flourished under John Paul II. The Polish Pope actively supported anti-communist movements in Eastern Europe, receiving American funding for this purpose. The archives are believed to contain reports on secret operations in Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. There may also be documents on the Vatican's role in the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the USSR. These materials could radically change our understanding of the end of the Cold War. Documents on pedophile scandals in the Church are a separate mystery. The first cases of sexual abuse of children were recorded as early as the 1950s, but systematic cover-ups began later. The archives may contain lists of pedophile priests, investigation reports, and correspondence with victims. Of particular interest are the documents of Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the future Pope Benedict XVI. As prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he oversaw all cases of sexual crimes committed by clergy. His archives may contain shocking details about the scale of the problem. No less mysterious are the documents on modern miracles and phenomena. The Vatican receives thousands of reports of visions of the Virgin Mary, miraculous healings, and mystical phenomena. Only a few cases receive official recognition, but all are thoroughly investigated. The archives must contain reports on unrecognized phenomena, medical reports on miracles, and testimonies from witnesses of paranormal events. These documents may reveal the Church's secret research into the supernatural. Technological progress has also given rise to new mysteries. The Vatican was one of the first to use computers to store information. Electronic archives contain gigabytes of secret data, protected by the most advanced encryption systems. Hackers have repeatedly tried to break into Vatican servers, but without success. The Church invests millions of dollars in cybersecurity, understanding the value of the information it stores. The Vatican's digital secrets may prove to be no less intriguing than its paper archives. Future declassifications promise new sensations. According to Vatican rules, documents are opened 75 years after their creation. This means that the archives of John XXIII will become available in 2037, and those of Paul VI in 2053. But the most intriguing secrets may never see the light of day. Some documents are classified as forever secret and will be destroyed along with their creators. Perhaps it is in these documents that the answers to the main questions about the Vatican's role in modern history lie. For now, we can only guess at the contents of the classified archives. But the documents that have already been released show that reality often exceeds even the wildest speculation. The Vatican holds secrets that could shake the very foundations of our understanding of history and faith.